Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, Avowed. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you guys for joining me on another episode of the World of Eora, and thank you for joining me on Christmas Day. Yes, I mean, there's no Christmas special about this. I think I'll put some jingle bells in the introduction, and that might be as far as it goes. Mainly being that there's no Christmas, technically, in Pillars of Eternity or Avowed, so not a lot Christmas to talk about in the lore, but hey, there's Christmas in real world, so hope anyone listening to this is having a happy holiday season, and that things are going well for you, playing lots of games, or getting lots of rests, or whatever it is that you need at this time of year. As you're listening to this, I'll probably be in the mountains with my family, hopefully, assuming I can get down the wintry roads we have over here. But anyways, that's enough of that. If you're new to the show, this is a lore and news podcast for Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. The reason we pair those games together is because they share the same fantasy world of Eora. And so, just as a way to geek out about stuff we love, we dive into the Pillars of Eternity lore, taking a look at all that stuff to enjoy it, but also for those who are interested in Avowed, it's a way for you to understand the world before you jump into the game. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite classes within this game, and there are other classes like it in other games, but I like the way that they do it for the World of Eora, and this is the Chanter class. And I find it appropriate to do at Christmas, actually, because at Christmas time, we tend to tell each other stories. Whether it's families getting together, regaling us with tales of things they've done throughout the year, or whether it's talking about what Christmas means, watching Christmas movies, etc., etc., it's about telling stories. And so much about being a chanter in the World of Eora is about telling stories and keeping lore. And obviously, it's something that I identify with a lot more because, well, you know, I do a lore podcast, so being a lore keeper is kind of my forte. In fact, on my YouTube Let's Play, I played as a chanter specifically for that reason. So, there you go. I'm a self-prescribed chanter. What kind of classes are you guys? For those not familiar with what class systems are in games, if you're like looking forward to Avowed, but you haven't really gotten to Pillars of Eternity type games, a class system is usually when it's what your character is in a game. So when you're playing a character in a video game, especially a role-playing game, you choose what kind of thing they are, right? So obviously in character creation, you'd be like, I'm a male or I'm a female, and I hail from this race of elves or dwarves or humans, etc., etc. But then you got to pick like what kind of profession, what kind of class, what kind of person is that character? And quite often there'll be things like clerics, wizards, fighters, rangers, druids, and all of those assortments. And chanter is one of the classes that you can play in the game. And so we're going to be talking about what a chanter is in this unique world that is Eora, how it fits into Pillars of Eternity, and how it might fit into Avowed. There's no news to go over about Pillars of Eternity or Avowed at the moment, so with that all said, we can just dive straight into the lore.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
Almost all of the information that is on today's episode is going to come from the Pillars of Eternity Strategy Guide. Now, this is different from the Pillars of Eternity Guidebook or the Collector's Edition book that you got from being a Kickstarter backer. The Strategy Guide is like a 500-page guide through the actual game itself, the quests that you play, the items that you'll find, the interactions with NPCs that you can have, and what you can say to them, and what kind of things you need to pass dialogue checks. So it's literally the game guide. But it has a lot of good information about what classes are, and so that's where primarily I'm going to be talking about that. Although we will be looking at Pillars of Eternity fandom for the articles on subclasses. So flipping through the strategy guide, when we get to page 11, we start looking at character creation, and we look at the gender you can have and the race you can have, as well as the class that you can have. 11 classes that you can have throughout Pillars of Eternity. You can choose from Barbarian, Chanter, Cypher, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Priest, Ranger, Rogue, and Wizard. There's a lot of them rattled off. Chanter, second one on the list. Now, this is the description that they use for Chanter. So if you're, for the first time getting into the game, this is the first paragraph you'll read in this book. Repositories of folk knowledge and common wisdom, tellers of tales and hallowed legends. They use their knowledge about old phrases to form chants during a battle. They have cycling lists of power, high AoE passive buffs and debuffs, and they can periodically use powerful invocation spells. So there's a little bit of like worldy lore stuff in there, and then a little bit of the gamey aspect to it as well. And we learn right from the get-go about how chanters have to do with the ancient knowledge of the world, telling stories and singing songs about what has gone on in Eora's past and history, but also that they have a unique power about them that somehow, through accessing this ancient knowledge and speaking about these things and singing about them, they're able to access a power in the kind of the spiritual area around them and cast spells, it sounds like, as well. We're going to get into how chanter magic works and how magic in Eora works in general, but if you're interested in magic specifically for this game, you can look at the episode I did, Magic in Eora. But for now, let's start off with the lore. Skipping ahead to page 60 in the strategy guide, we actually get the space for the chanter itself. So this is where we actually start talking about the specific classes in depth, and this is under the lore category. In every culture across Eora, there are chanters. Many historians consider chanters to be the most ancient workers of magic. Their hallowed phrases stirring the collective memory of wayward souls around them, compelling them to generate magical effects in a kind of reenactment. In some societies, chanters form organized groups of storytellers and researchers, but in most parts of the world, they are just time-honored part of local folk traditions. So right there, we get a little hint about how chanters work in this world. So how magic works in Eora, in short, is essentially there is this stuff called essence. Essence is the stuff that souls are made of. Just like your body's made of carbon, souls are made of essence. At least that's how I understand it. And the way that different individuals interact with that essence is how different people use magic. So in the cases of a wizard, they bind essence into the grimoire, the pages of a book, and they release that essence to cast a spell. Ciphers, which are kind of like a psionic class, they extract essence from people that they interact with, and they use that little bit of siphoned essence to then cast magical spells. Chanters do something a little bit different. What chanters do is, as it's described in here, is they stir the collective memory of wayward souls around them. And what that kind of means is that if you're a chanter and you're standing in a certain place and you want to cast a spell, you start stirring the collective memory of wayward souls around you. So all around you are these wayward souls. There's this essence everywhere you go. It's in the trees, in the rocks, in the air, it's in the people, blah, 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 blah. And these wayward souls that are kind of around you and your person, you're going to start chanting chants, and it's going to kind of bring these souls to action. At least that's how I understand it. How I like to picture it in my head is that, let's say there's a bunch of souls in the area that have this knowledge, obviously, of some ancient battle. Now, obviously, you're not talking about specific souls. We're talking about, it says, collective memory. So all these wayward souls that are around, they must, in some way, shape, or form, have a collective memory of what each other is about, or different parts of history. And so if you're wanting to cast a specific spell that happened in an ancient battle, well, if you start retelling this ancient battle in a poetic way, it kind of stirs the emotions and the memories of these souls that are around you. It makes them remember that battle. And then in a sense, they reenact it, which allows you to actually cast the spell. Although you're not really casting the spell, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's more like you are making the wayward souls around you remember something that they did, and then they reenact that thing, and that itself is the actual thing it casts. We're going to get into it a little more. It sounds like you actually kind of focus the energy into an invocation. We'll learn what all of those are. Chanters are historians and storytellers, their memories saturated with generations of oral tradition. The distinguishing power of chanters is their ability to continually chant magical phrases that have a wide variety of effects. Chanters can combine phrases in a variety of ways to suit their needs, adding and removing individual elements as they see fit. They are also capable of casting powerful spells called invocations after they have spoken enough phrases in battle. So this is kind of talking about how chanters work on a gamey aspect, but without sounding too gamey. Essentially, when a chanter enters into combat within the game, they start chanting their chants. And as the chanter is chanting, it basically, as many chants as you are doing, increases how much power that you have stored up for yourself. Once you have stored up enough power, then you can cast a magical ability called an invocation. This is how it works. You start chanting chants. Once you have chanted 3 chants, you can now cast, like a 3rd level invocation, for example. It doesn't actually work like that, like 3rd level. I'm pretty sure you need more for that. Point being, though, the more chanting you do, the more power you have kind of stored up, and the higher the invocation or the magical spell that you can cast. That's how it's working. Through the clever overlapping of phrases, chanters can grant their allies a sizable stack of minor bonuses over a large area. While chants may seem modest compared to a wizard or a priest magic, chanters are able to recite their chants while occupied with other activities, making them extremely versatile. Additionally, chanters' invocations are powerful spells which they have the highest number of summoning spells. So this is important to note. If as like a wizard or something, if you're a wizard casting a spell, all of your energy and focus goes into casting that spell. You can't do anything else. You're just sitting there getting that spell out and flinging it at whoever you want to attack. But as a chanter, you can sit there and chant and sing your song, and you can shoot away with your gun. You can slice away with your sword. You can put up your shield for defense. You can do other things while you're chanting. And then another thing that's interesting about chanters is they have the most summoning spells. And I think that makes sense. That kind of fits the flavor of what a chanter is, because they are able to cause reenactments of historical battles or things that have happened in the past. And so it kind of makes sense that you could say summon a bunch of skeletons from the ground and they would actually start doing the thing that you're talking about. And when these chanters are chanting, phrases is, I guess, what they're technically called. They're chanting these phrases. When they're chanting phrases, the phrases themselves have benefits already. So even though you're chanting phrases to gain power so you can cast an invocation spell, technically speaking, the phrases themselves have buffs or debuffs in the character. So if you're chanting a chant so that you can gain your ability, so you can cast some Thunder Wave ability, let's say, the whole time you're chanting, you're actually, giving you and your allies a boost to your constitution. You're making them more strong. Or you're making enemies around you confused or something like that. So on top of being able to build up power and push out these spells, you're actually causing the area around you immediately to be imbued with magic that is both beneficial to you or harmful to people you don't like around you. So a chant is made up of multiple phrases. At least that's how it is. A chanter will go through a series of phrases, and once those phrases are done, they have completed one chant. So if you're playing the game, you'll have all these phrases that your character goes through during battle. And once they're done those phrases, you've reached one chant. And if they'll do it again, and once they've reached the end of those phrases, they'll have two chants. And once you have enough chants, you can then cast an invocation. Examples of some invocations are all interesting in the fact that their titles sound like poetry, right? So if you're a wizard and you're casting something, you'd be like, I cast Fireball. What is that? It's a fireball. You shoot a fireball. But invocations from a chanter are things like, thrice was she wronged and thrice justly avenged. That's the name of the magical spell that you're trying to do. Thrice she was wronged and thrice justly avenged. What that particular invocation does, first, it requires that 3 phrases be chanted. So you have to have chanted 3 phrases. And this thing has an area effect, and it shocks enemies nearby. So if there are enemies nearby, they get shocked. That's what that is. So basically, you're casting sort of like a lightning bolt. But it's not called that. It's called thrice she was wronged and thrice justly avenged. Another example of a level 1 invocation is the thunder rolled like waves on black seas. And this is essentially kind of like Thunder Wave from D&D. Enemies that are nearby you are pushed and stunned for a while. So basically they get knocked over and pushed back because you have caused this kind of like thunderous wave from yourself, Another example of an invocation. If their bones still slept under that hill, none can say. And you just summon three skeletons. That's all that is. So 3 human skeletons pop out of the ground because you're like, if none of their bones slept under that hill, none can say. And they're like, yep, we got it. Pop out of the ground, and that's how it goes. So you cast these invocations, which are in the form of poetry, by chanting phrases. An example of a phrase is something like, thick grew their tongues stumbling o'er worlds. And that particular phrase reduces concentration of enemies in the area of effect. So essentially, it's harder for your enemies around you to focus on their abilities, which means they might fail at casting a spell because they couldn't focus very well. Another example is, blessed was Wengrith, quickest of his tribe, which increases the movement and reflex of all the allies in the area, so you and your friends become a little quicker and a little more deft. So these phrases that you're chanting cause this kind of like background positive effects for you or negative for your enemies, and then you use those to cast these invocations that we're talking about. And I love that they're always filled with poeticness to them. Poeticness, I'm not sure if that's a word, but there it is. And I love that there is like little hints to lore that we don't know about, like that phrase I just read, blessed was Wengrid, quickest of his tribe. I don't know who Wengrid is, but there it is, right? And one of the level 1 invocations that we have on this page is and Hel Hyrif crashed upon the shield. I don't know who Hel Hyrif is, but that's so cool that it's there in the first place. That's the kind of stuff we're dealing with Chanters and the magic that they use. One of my favorites is a level 3 invocation, and it's just called Summon Noble Creature. And I don't understand it. Like, I'm looking at a page full of magical spells. We have 1 dozen stood against the power of the saint, or 7 men onto the deck they went, and then Summon Noble Creature. Well, like, what happened there? I don't understand what happened there. This is a Chanter spell. You summon a beagle dog to fight by your side. That's all that is, and I love it. I'm here for it. Now, when we talk about Chanters, we're just thinking in these broad terms of a person who chants ancient lore and it stirs magic around them so that they can cast these these invocations out at things. But is there anything more specific than that? Like, what kind of chanters can we have? Well, in the first game, there's not really a lot of option. It's just the one type of chanter. But in Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, Obsidian created 5 subclasses that you can have as a chanter. And they are Beckoner, Skald, Stormspeaker, Troubadour, and Bellower. And you can choose any of these or none, depending on how you want to play the game. But these are the types of chanters that we're talking about. A Beckoner is someone who specializes in invocations that summon spirits from the in-between. The in-between is kind of the state between life and death. It's kind of like when a person dies in the world of Eora, their soul leaves the body, and then they head towards basically the afterlife, the underworld, if you want to call it that, but that's not what it is. But the transition between is the in-between. There's a lot more lore than just that, but that's what I'm going to leave it at for now. They often come from cultures with a close connection to nature and reverence for their ancestors. So the Beckoner is a type of chanter that is great at summoning spirits, specifically spirits. They can summon twice the number of creatures as a bonus, but unfortunately the penalty for them is that they have half their normal health. Each of these subclasses have a plus and a minus. I'm not going to talk about too much about that stuff because it's more about lore, but this is what a Beckoner is. A Skald is described as such. While many chanters prefer to work their magic from the safety of the backlines, Skalds depend on toe-to-toe combat to power their invocation. Skalds are found in many cultures with a proud martial tradition, celebrating the deeds of their neighbors, kin, and ancestors. So a Skald, it sounds like, is someone who has to be actually in the fray. A lot of chanters in the game, you'll usually have them hanging back while they're chanting, and they're shooting with some sort of ranged weapon. But if you're going to be playing as a Skald in the second Pillars of Eternity game, you have to be toe-to-toe. And I love that idea. I would love to see, like, if Pillars of Eternity ever had, like, an animated series, I think I would love to see a Skald chanter, because I have this really cool idea in my head of someone who is almost like dancing through enemies, where they're like blocking this hit with the shield and like stabbing someone with a pike in one hit. And the entire time they're like singing a song and dancing around their enemies' attacks. It just sounds so badass to me. And I love the chanters for that reason. Next is Stormspeaker, and it should be noted that you as the character in the game cannot have this subclass. This is specifically for only one of your companions, Tekehu. But here's the lore for Stormspeaker. Stormspeakers are found on almost every Huana tribe, which are some of the native tribes that live in the Deadfire Archipelago, the setting for the second game. They are called upon not only to defend their tribes from violent weather, but also to utilize the fierce powers of weather against tribal foes. Now, before I keep going, that's something important to note here, is that chanters are able to actually use magic to control weather, it sounds like, in a weird sort of way. There's a lot of magic that's discussed in the second game about controlling weather and violent storms and being able to fight back against nature itself. It's very interesting. The Stormspeakers themselves attribute the power of their tradition to the constant potential for violent weather in the Deadfire Archipelago. Some of the invocations they use allegedly date back to the great cataclysm that once devastated the Huana people, which is an entire history that we do not have the time to get into right now. Next is Troubadour. Troubadours are masters of the chant, able to adjust the speed of their chanting and the linger of their phrases to suit the needs of battle. More passive than any chanter, troubadours relish their support in the role in the midst of their comrades. Troubadours originate in Old Valia, but are common in the Valian Republics and many other lands. Old Valia and Valian Republics are just other empires and factions that exist within the game's lore. We're not going to get into them right here. But it sounds like a troubadour have kind of mastered, in a sense, how to chant faster and slower as is needed. Because I guess when you think about it, like, you just picture a chanter chanting their chant, and the magic is getting built up, and that's all fine and dandy. But you think to yourself, like, what happens if you go all rap god in the middle of a fight? Does it make the phrases Does it make the magic that much more intense? Does it cause anything else to happen? Do you get the magic faster, but at a cost to yourself? Like, this is all interesting questions to ask. And it sounds like a troubadour has kind of mastered that, like, slowing down and speeding up in order to kind of mold the magic how they need it specifically. And lastly is a bellower. Bellowers are often found in communities steeped in hardship, particularly among those that have experienced recent misfortune. Their tales better resemble a collection of ramblings and gibberish than coherent stories. Their names stem from a rare, violent, impassioned outburst of fearsome magic. So, bellowers are just, I guess, people that just, like, it does not offer a lot there. It sounds to me like they just sort of, like, ramble on about the negative things that have happened in an area and to people. But I'm willing to bet that by just sort of, like, rapid firing these different cataclysms, these different pieces of history, that you're able to cause a lot more magic to be built up so that you can have invocations. The bonus to them is that invocations grant a brief bonus to power level based on the number of held phrases. The penalty is invocations consume all remaining phrases. So they're just a little bit more passionate. They're a little bit more, I don't know, wild, even reckless, you could say. But at that cost of this recklessness, which consumes all your magic quicker, you have stronger magic, it sounds like. And so that is a chanter, how chanters work with their magic, and different types of chanters that you can have. I'm interested in anyone out there, if you are deep into, like, homebrew stuff, if there's any other kinds of chanters you can think of. What's a subclass you would make for a chanter, thinking about how it works? Again, like, the chanters work by uttering phrases of historical events so that it stirs the souls around them into action. And you can speed up and slow down how you chant. You can maybe change the tone. You could make things a story or a song, or you could just randomly put out gibberish that is related to what you're singing about. Or maybe it's spoken. Like, what different ways can you think of a chanter subclass? Hit me up, worldofaora@gmail.com. Before we move on to the Avowed section, I'm just going to do the item descriptions. And there's really only one item that I want to focus on, because the rest are just telling stories about individual people. This one kind of talks a little bit about chanters. It's in the first Pillars of Eternity game, and is a necklace that you can wear called Voice of the Mountaintop. And these are only usable by chanters. Dwarven chanters of the White March, which is an area in the DLC that you get to play in from the first Pillars game, are said to have mastered projection techniques to such a degree that they can trigger distant avalanches with their voices. Whether or not this specific rumor is true, they are known to chant between peaks and across rugged valleys, exchanging messages with their brethren across great distances. I love this idea of focusing the power of your chants to be able to do something specific, like cause avalanches in their area. And this is useful beyond just, taking out enemy camps or something like that. It could also be a thing to keep valleys safe. Okay, like, all right, there's no one in the valley right now. It's the start of the winter season. Let's get rid of all the snow so we can cross safely. That way, before the next snowfall happens, we can go into the area and do what we need to do. I like this idea of chanters becoming intertwined with the society and with the culture, and I love how Obsidian writes lore like this. It makes you think, how do these people actually engage in the world around them? This amulet was forged by an ancient order of druids in the White March, precursors to the Ethic Knoll of Twin Elms, and I already talked about them in a bonus episode. It was worn and passed down from one watchman to the next, men and women who stood guard atop the high peaks, ready to warn their fellows of approaching armies. So there you go. Using chanters is kind of like warning beacons for incoming enemies. And that's all the lore that I have that I want to talk about with chanters. I love this idea of knowing ancient knowledge and just reciting it in such a way that it causes the emotions within wayward souls around you to stir and do things. And this idea that you're almost like manipulating a piece of history, bringing it back, and being able to cast it onto the battlefield to do things. And obviously not just in the battlefield, like you can use them circumstantially as well, but that's just the most common way to do things because we're playing video games. In video games, we deal with combat a lot. I love chanters for that reason. That's enough of me fangirling over the class. What are chanters going to be like in Avowed? Let's speculate.
Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
So obviously at this point of the episode, if you're depending on when you're listening to this, we don't actually know what's going to be in Avowed. There are obvious things that chanters could be included in Avowed as. One, it might be a class that you can pick for your character. If in character creation for Avowed, we're allowed to choose our classes. We don't know anything about character creation at this point, so we don't know if we're going to be able to select classes or build towards them or what have you. But if we can select classes, chanter is a viable one to have. and it would be pretty cool to be able to play in game. If we can't select classes, there's always the chance that we could build our character's personal class toward that. It just depends on how Obsidian is wanting to build that leveling tree up and how they want to do things. There is, of course, always the chance that that we will not actually select classes or build one. We'll be prescribed one, right? So our character could just be a chanter, and that's just what we are. The obvious other one is that NPCs in the world might be chanters, and so maybe our character can or cannot become a chanter ourselves, but the people that we interact with in the game, some of them might be chanters. We might have to go up against generic enemies, Chanter 1, 2, or 3 on the battlefield, stuff like that. And how are we going to combat them? I think that chanters would be really annoying enemies to have, because whenever you play a game and you're fighting a lot of enemies, you can always hear this weird sound in the background, and it's making everyone have their health regenerate, and you're like, that's so annoying, I'm trying to kill these things. I don't know why, but the first instance that came to mind was Psychonauts, especially Psychonauts 2, and you had to deal with the cheerleaders. Oh man, they were annoying, but I feel like that would be a good analog for what a chanter is. If any of you out there have played Psychonauts 2, I feel like that's kind of what a chanter would be. And so they would be one of those characters that kind of hide in the background. You don't really know they're there, but you can hear them. They're chanting, they're singing, and they're causing all the enemies you're fighting, which should normally be pretty easy, to be a little more difficult, so you have to deal with them first. Chanters will also probably be good sources of lore, so if you're trying to do a side quest that involves knowing some secret knowledge, maybe go talk to someone who's a chanter in the game. Assuming Obsidian has written them into the side quest, they might actually be able to offer you some good knowledge. Maybe one of our companions, assuming we can take companions along, can also be a chanter, and they can help out with that kind of thing. They're also very persuasive, highly charismatic people, generally speaking, and so they would be probably giving you a boon or a boost to those stats, whatever is involved in Avowed. Those are the first things that come to mind when it comes to how chanters can be involved in Avowed, is your character or other NPCs. And with that said, that's everything that we have for today on Chanters. Everyone, thank you so much for listening today. It's been really awesome diving into this stuff. I miss playing my old Chanter character, and I want to get back into it again. The Chanter class in Deadfire, the second Pillars of Eternity game, was one of my favorites in terms of classes to play. I loved the Chanter class. It's always been one of my favorites. I love going towards it. Now, before we close up this episode, last episode I gave some shoutouts to people who left reviews on different podcasting services, and it's come to my attention that actually there are even more places to do reviews. So I didn't realize that Apple Podcasting has, and this makes sense, they have different websites for different regions. So if you're from Canada or from the US or from somewhere in the UK, or et cetera, they have different websites for that, and there are different reviews on there. So I missed 2 reviews through different websites, and I'm going to do them out here now because I really want to say thank you for that. So on the Canadian Apple Podcast website, September 26th of this year, we have 5 out of 5 stars, thank you, from Pearly Popo. I'm not sure how you're wanting me to pronounce that. It says, I always wanted to dive more into the lore of the RPG games I play. I just don't have the time. This podcast gave me the opportunity of doing it while my other activities. It's great. I just wish there had been more podcasts like it. Also, it feels really professional. Thanks, man. Oh, I love this. I don't know how to say your name, man. I'm sorry. Or woman. I shouldn't assume. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Especially at the end there, it says it feels really professional. I have tried to go out of my way to sounding not like an amateur podcast, although technically that's what this is. I'm just a UPS dude who has a PC in his living room, and I'm like, yeah, I'll talk about this nerd stuff. Why not? So it's really good to hear that. It's very affirming. Thank you. I'm glad you're getting some value out of it. Another review comes from a website, podcastaddict.com. And a review there from Seppel, July 28th of this year, 5 stars. The best, and maybe the only, in brackets, podcast about the world of the Pillars of Eternity games, and one of the best about video game lore in general. Thank you, Seppel. I really appreciate that. Yeah, there's not a lot out there for Pillars of Eternity, which, at first I was kind of happy about, because I'm like, yeah, no competition, I'll be a good voice. But at the same time, getting into it more, I'm like, you know what? It's so cool when there's more people involved with this stuff. I loved getting involved with the Avowedcast podcast. I love seeing the different YouTube videos out there on the lore. Yeah, if you guys don't know that, by the way, there are YouTube videos that people have put out about the lore that Avowed is going to have, kind of like what I'm doing, but in a video format. Obviously using whatever assets they can get from Pillars of Eternity and all that. But there's some great stuff out there, and I want everyone to check it out. So The more Pillars of Eternity and Avowed content we get out there, the better. And if anybody out there has ideas for content that can be created, you should go for it, because it's awesome to get involved with the community. And I also, if anyone out there is working on a project and you want a little shout out, let me know, and I'll happily bring it up on the show. But thank you, Sepple, for the wonderful comments that you've given. I really do appreciate it. Things like this, it energizes me. And I'm like, it's so cool to see people getting value out of this weird thing that I just sit down in my chair and do. Now that's everything from the show. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you for joining me on this little talk I've been giving about Chanters that exist within the World of Eora, how it might be played in Avowed, going through a couple reviews that people gave. Thanks again for all that. No news about the show or anything else going on. Christmas is coming up. Well, actually, at the time of recording, it's coming up, but this episode itself is coming out at Christmas. So, Merry Christmas, everyone, or Happy Holidays, whatever, suits your fancy. Don't want to offend anyone, but there you are. Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, the whole shebang. Thanks so much for joining me. I haven't been playing any games worth talking about. I'm still playing Grounded, because I only play 1 hour of a game every day, so that's what I've been getting into lately. And that's it. Thanks, everyone, for joining me on today's episode. I'm your host, Eric, a.k.a. Gingerino. I'll see you guys next time.